and this, such as DACA, and this person was asking now that it is abolished. My understanding is DACA is not abolished; it's kind of in the suspension status.
Well, DACA right now is dead.
It is dead. Okay.
You cannot apply to have DACA
Okay.
renewed. If you still have it,
That's what's up in the air.
You've got it until the date on your card expires.
Okay.
Okay. But if you were in the pipeline, you can't get it. If your card expires March, well, actually, I mean, if your card, DACA was a 2-year renewal program. You can't renew it right now.
Okay.
So when your card expires, that's it.
Okay.
There's actually today kind of National Day, like Day of Action, where there's a lot going on around DACA. Needs a congressional fix.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if it's going to happen. But there are lots of things that social workers can do to help undocumented people. I think it's important for people to, and I know a lot of trust has to be established before people reveal their status, but I think first of all, don't assume that people you're helping are U.S. citizens unless you know they are, and then if something is revealed in confidence, of course you keep that confidence, and you understand it's important to know, like, as far as public benefits, right, what people
Right.
are eligible for, what they're not eligible for, and then help them find services that will help them regardless of their status, right? Like food with
Right.
food banks.
Right.
I think Kalihi Palama Health Center. I mean, there are, I think, probably the Waikiki Health Center. I'm not 100% sure, but there are limited resources available, but they are available for people who don't have legal status. And it's also important to understand too that there are a lot of mixed status families in our community where, say, mom is a U.S. citizen, dad has no status.
Right. Or like the family in Maui, the mother the kids
mother
yes.
no kids
right.
yes, right.
Okay.
And that's not uncommon among Pacific Islanders too. A lot of people came on visas and then overstayed,
Okay.
and so and are kind of surviving in the informal economy. If the kids were born here, the kids are citizens, but you can't assume,
Okay.
and so you don't want to send someone for something that they can't.
That may flag them in some way,
right,
or
and just be sensitive to, and don't judge. And I mean, social workers hopefully, are going to be less judgmental, but people come for all kinds of reasons, and the article talked about the push-pull factors,
right.
Sometimes it's safety, often it's a better future for their kids, right? And if the roles were reversed and we had been born where they were born, and those were our, we had those options, what would we do?
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Wide open. I don't know if this, or if we combine it with something else. What is your best practice protocol for working with a client who's not a legal citizen? I assume it depends on the issue, but
yeah. So I mean, so a lot of my clients are not, and so it's first of all, I remind people that that everything is confidential. It's a big step for someone to call an attorney if they've been kind of living in the shadows for many years, and so just to be sensitive to that, and let them know that, a lot of my clients, they're in good company with a lot of other really fabulous people who don't have status also, and then work through their options.
Okay.
But I think confidentiality is, again, it's critical, and to remind people that what's said here stays here, and then of course not to. I mean, I can tell with clients' permissions general stories about, because I think it's important that people locally know some of the stories that I hear.
Right.
People, for lots of reasons, won't go on camera, but I can help share their stories again with permission.
Right, to kind of humanize
and
this issue that
really,
people have a lot of assumptions about.
Exactly,
right.
exactly.
Okay.
But then you see that human face, and you see that, and then, or if they're willing to go forward, or you hear their story through someone else, and it maybe changes something in some people.
Right. And the question below that, I assume, is similar with the spouse working with clients, best practice working with clients who have a spouse or family member not a legal citizen. Similar
Yeah,
depending
I
on
think
issue.
just so there are limited legal services options in Hawaii.
I was going to ask about that, right?
So let's let me go through. So Catholic Charities has a immigrant program. Pacific Gateway Center also
Right.
has an immigrant program. They do help with each of those agencies has accredited representatives who are trained in helping people with forms, and I believe a lot of them are. A lot of the help is either free or it's based on a
Okay.
sliding scale, and so those are good places to call for assistance. People can always call me, and I'll give, if it's kind of simple general advice. I do that. I do that a lot, and most immigration attorneys will.
What about legal aid? Is how?
So legal aid has the Hawaii Immigrant Justice Center is part
Okay.
of legal aid. Because of the restrictions, legal aid gets federal funding.
Right.
There are restrictions against who they can assist. So it's generally limited to victims of domestic violence or crime victims or trafficking victims.
Okay.
Okay. So I used to work for the organization, the nonprofit that was the kind of predecessor to the Hawaii Immigrant Justice Center, and it was called Naloyo, based out of Palama Settlement, and that was when there was a lot more funding from the state that was unrestricted. So I did represent clients in deportation proceedings who were indigent and even had criminal records, but had other compelling things about them. In a good way, but the Hawaii Immigrant Justice Center can't do that now.
Okay,
So right
okay.
now there's no legal services, free legal services for people who are in deportation proceedings, except for attorneys who agree to take cases pro bono.
Okay. And I just, I think it was yesterday, it was either on National Public Radio or it was something I was reading, was talking about a pilot or in New York where they were assigning every person
Yeah.
an attorney.
Yeah.
And I mean, I don't know that people know that most people don't have an attorney when they're in deportation. And then the big difference between whether they were deported or not was whether they had an attorney present.
Yep, that is true. And it's and actually some of the cases, some of my pro bono cases that I've picked up were from immigration court where I saw people who were trying to do it on their own and were just, and so I talked to them afterwards to just try to give them some basic, and then learned enough about the case and realized that they could never afford an attorney or navigate this, and then offered my services pro bono.
Right.
And I wish I could do more of that, and I know a lot of immigration attorneys do pro bono work. I'm really limited to how much I can take on because they take so much time. And if I was working for a nonprofit and getting a salary, that would be one thing. But I have to balance that with the cases that are able to pay. Yeah.
So then there's a few questions about kind of the 8 banned countries. Are we at 8 now?
Yeah, we are at 8 now.
How many people have immigrated? So how much does this, all these 3 questions, how much does this affect the state of Hawaii? So these 8 banned country lists.
A bit, not as much as a lot of other states. States like Michigan, where they're again, I mean, most of the people on this ban are, the whole North Korea thing. There were so few people, and the whole Venezuela thing, so few people. So and Chad.
Chad, right.
So few. Okay. So, the countries that are the most effective, we don't have huge populations. We do have people who are affected, which is why Hawaii was able to challenge successfully 3 times the ban. Oftentimes through students coming into the universities, or the plaintiff in the one case, the imam from the mosque, was his mother-in-law who wanted to come and visit. But our numbers are not as large of people from those countries as other countries, but it has had a limited impact, and again enough to kind of get into court and make that argument.
Right.
And that's something again that is being challenged in the court on multiple levels. It's almost a full-time job keeping up with those cases, and we'll see kind of how that plays out. I mean, one of the refugee ban has been Hawaii doesn't take in a lot of refugees because of a number of reasons. One is the high cost of living here. Two, the countries that people are coming as refugees from, we don't have significant populations in the state, so there aren't the same kind of support services. So it doesn't make sense to bring a Somali refugee so much into Hawaii so we lose out on that diversity. But again, you need to bring people in places where they're going to thrive, and
there's
Hawaii,
a community,
exactly, to support them. And so we don't have that. So Pacific Gateway Center, I believe, is the one organization now that's designated for refugee resettlement. But it's a handful. Maybe Burma has been the most recent because we do have a small Burmese community here. There was one question about incidents of terrorism.
Right. So it's around that 8 band country.
In the last 10 years, not that I know of. I believe the answer is no. I think we'd all know if the answer was any different.
So what about the in general, how have the many recent court decisions, policy changes affected your practice? You've already alluded to you're having to study and keep up constantly.
It keeps us on our toes.
What is one that has had a big effect? Biggest changes?
I think the biggest change, and kind of similar to what I talked to before, is the lack of the lack of prosecutorial discretion, or the lack of discretion now that say Immigration Customs Enforcement has with prioritizing deportation cases. It's not that they don't have any discretion, but if you look at the memos, and again, it's not like the Obama administration was great on immigration, because there were lots and lots of good people who were, I think, wrongly deported under the Obama administration. But if you look at memos that came out during that time, they did talk about families and looking at equities and kind of looking at the totality, the circumstances, and who to put resources, where to direct resources. Now those memos are so cold, and there's no kind of warm and fuzzy language about children or spouses or anything. People with criminal histories are still at the top of the list, no surprise. But everyone else is fair game. And that's been the hardest thing, because that's brought in a whole new group of people. And the immigration laws are very, very limited as to who can argue anything before an immigration judge. For example, for many people who don't have status, if they have a U.S. citizen husband or spouse, or children, or permanent resident spouse, for them to, in general, make an argument for staying in the United States, they have to show that they've been here at least 10 years, have had good moral character for that time, and the real kicker, the 10 years sometimes is hard, but that they have a qualifying relative, so a U.S. citizen or permanent resident relative, and that family member will suffer extreme and exceptionally unusual hardship. That's the hardship standard.
Oh, wow.
So there's, under immigration law, extreme hardship is a requirement proving that for certain things. And then you have this elevated hardship level, which is really, really difficult. And it's much more than I'm going to be separated from my spouse and my kids. If we all go back together, we're all going to be poor. The kids don't speak the language of the country. That's all normal hardship. Normal hardship of deportation, right? Think about what normal hardship of deportation is. It's all those bad things. You have to show more. So, for example, I had a child once who had leukemia, who was a U.S. citizen. That was a good case. It's heartbreaking. So it's bad becomes good, and good becomes bad. If everybody's healthy, doing well in school, that makes for a really hard case, because you don't have that. You need something special. And this is where social workers can also come and help, where I have oftentimes social workers write letters of support for families. Social workers who work in schools and who know the situation will write letters talking about what they've seen in that family. I just had a case, another pro bono case that I've had since 2008, where the social worker that's there in California wrote a case. There was some concern about whether the husband, the dad, who had a couple of arrests, but whether he presented a danger to family or society. And she was able to, she's been working with his family for a long time, providing